Welcome to another episode of Margin for Error, the podcast where we explore the critical decisions, strategies, and frameworks that separate successful companies from those that fall short. I'm Ed Lee, and I help high-growth startups optimize their pricing and monetization to drive multiplied growth and impact. Today's conversation is especially relevant because we're talking about a category where data, intelligence, and real-time decision-making directly impact revenue, especially for e-commerce. I'm excited to have Jeff Neal, one of the three co-founders of ShopVision AI, to share his experience with us today. For those who don't have the context, ShopVision AI is an AI platform that acts as a super agent for brands, automating competitive intelligence, campaign planning, merchandising, and even price optimization. Jeff brings a wealth of technical and business and product experience from consumer tech and fashion tech to now start ShopVision with his co-founder. So I'd like to welcome you, Jeff, to our podcast, Margin for Error.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So just to kind of start off, how did the three of you and your co-founders, Peter and Harry, end up working together on this?
Yeah, great question. So as you briefly mentioned there, my background is in e-commerce and consumer technology. I always worked on the brand side. And so saw firsthand how difficult it is to scale e-commerce, how expensive it's gotten, how many people it takes to run an e-commerce org, as well as how disorganized e-commerce companies can be. And even though as a consumer, we look and we see these brands and we're like, oh, they've got it all buttoned up. They know what they're doing. Internally, in my experience, tends to not be the case. Both Harry and Peter had many years experience on the e-commerce vendor side. And so Harry is the founder of ElasticPath, which is a mid-market e-commerce platform. Peter worked at Magento, Forrester Research on the e-commerce technology side. And so just had a huge amount of experience on the vendor side. We were kind of all talking, in the age of AI, towards the end of 2023, what's going to happen in the AI, in the e-commerce space when it comes to AI. And that's how that got together. And, I think like the vision, the tool has, as most startups do, evolved over time. But initially we were really focused on, there's a lot of manual processes. There's a lot of disorganization and just too much data that is available to these e-commerce companies. And how is AI going to solve those problems? And really, we wanted to take kind of our deep knowledge of e-commerce and start in that realm.
No, I think it's really fascinating. I'm going to come back to the data piece, but even just before that, clearly you, Peter, and Harry have a wealth of experience and knowledge. What was that aha moment, though, for you to say, let's go and build this?
Yeah, honestly, Peter and Harry started talking about it before I did. So I want to say early December 2023, they got together. They'd worked together at ElasticPath many years prior. And they were just having the conversation of, what can AI do? And they started with, with this proliferation of data and AI, they're going to be able to automate a lot of the manual stuff that's going on in e-commerce companies from a marketing perspective, merchandising perspective. And but they knew they needed a technical co-founder. I was a customer of ElasticPath and knew Harry through that, as well as like an earlier RFP when I was at the Honest Company. And they came to me and kind of gave me a rough idea. And the aha moment for me was just really looking at how many people it takes to run an e-commerce store and knowing that there was still a list of things that every brand has that like were not done, right? There's just this endless list of items to get done that nobody ever seems to have enough time for. When I worked at the Honest Company, I think at some point we were up to about 500 employees, and this is an e-commerce company, right? Like 500 employees running an e-commerce company, it's just... And still, there was a list of things that was never done. So that was a big aha moment for me. And really, we started how we got to competitive intelligence and market intelligence and all of that is we knew we had to build a data set. AI is only as good as the data set that supports it. And so we started building that data set, knowing that the future was, very much in kind of automation and all of those things. Can we monetize this data set before? Is there value in the data set as it is? And that's where we really realized we've got something here is the data and the insights that we were able to get out of the data were so helpful that we thought maybe we'd arrived sooner than we expected. Maybe full automation isn't the goal. Maybe it's arming the teams that exist today with kind of superpowers, which is where we get our AI super agent concept. And so I would say the kind of aha moments happened. There were multiple, and they happened sooner than we were expecting.
So if we look at it, then you saw it internally. Obviously, you've been experienced some of these kind of pain points directly, when you were at a consumer brand, e-commerce brand like The Honest Company. When you talk to e-commerce brands, what are some of the pain points that come up most consistently? What are they trying to solve for? Are they clear in terms of what they're trying to solve?
Yeah, there are a lot of them, and we've gotten into some very specific ones at ShopVision, but also some more generally. I think how we got here, in my opinion, is we went through, I want to say 10 to 15 years ago, is kind of this proliferation of data. And we were like, okay, everything should be data-driven decisions. We're no longer making decisions based on gut. There's plenty of analytics platforms out there. And we went through this proliferation where every single platform, no matter what SaaS you were using, had an analytics component, right? You could always track what was happening because we believed as an industry that more data is better. And so what you have at e-commerce companies is a ton of data. The problem, and I think this is probably one of our core problems that we solve, is signal to noise ratio, and just understanding, okay, I've got all this data, but what pieces of that data actually matter, and what is that data telling me? Now, some businesses pre-AI started solving that by growing their data teams, right? So throwing humans at the problem and saying, okay, now I have all this data. I want to make data-driven decisions. So I'm going to hire data engineers and data analysts to look through this data and tell me what the signals are. That works okay at small scale. The problem with that is data engineers are expensive. They are clogged with requests themselves. And by the time you get the analysis out of that data, it's 3 weeks too late. E-commerce moves really quickly, especially in the season that we're in right now of holiday season, Black Friday, all of that. Like the speed to insight is so important there. So I would say that's one critical issue that we have solved. The other is there still is missing pieces when it comes to what their competition is doing. So a lot of brands will kind of hear about what their competition is doing very ad hoc, right? Somebody's wife was signed up for a newsletter for their biggest competitor and realized that they launched their Black Friday sale, and they'll bubble that up. But there's no kind of official channel, and only the largest of the large businesses are really able to have competitive intelligence organizations like within the company. These are, massive enterprises, but that information is just as relevant, if not more relevant, to the folks at more mid-market size companies, of which like competitive intelligence is near impossible to find there.
That's really interesting. And this whole idea about not just needing just more data, that's one part, but it's also what do you do with that data? And I really like that signal to noise ratio. And really kind of highlighting, how important that is to actually really extract some of that value out of all that information that you may have or you need to go out and get more of. You mentioned this, the AI super agent, and when we think about and as part of ShopVision's positioning, and that's a really powerful position. What does that actually mean in practice, and how is that different from another analytics dashboard?
Yeah, great question. I think it's been an evolution throughout the almost 2 years that we've been in business, is exactly what that term means. Initially, and still today, we went pretty wide in what we offered. And so we focused on having the highest quality data and the largest volume of data in e-commerce. And I think we have achieved that and are continuing to grow it every day. We have over 2 billion unique e-commerce data points in our in our data warehouse, and our agent has access to all of them. And so what makes it a super agent is a couple things. Thing one is it has access to all of that data, and that data serves marketing teams, it serves merchandising teams, it serves e-commerce teams, data teams, competitive intelligence teams. And so it really spans out from just like, hey, this is just a chatbot, right? I think a lot of folks, with the kind of agentic shift here, it's like I called it a chatbot last week, but now we're talking about agents. Now it's an agent, right? For us, like in order to be called an agent, it has to be taking actions on its own agentically. And in order to be called a super agent, it needs to work across many, many use cases. And again, our foundation of data is what made that happen. Now, I will say traditional SaaS wisdom is you should do one or two things and you should do it really well and you should not do anything else. And I think this is very much my personal opinion, but I think that type of rhetoric makes sense in the pre-AI days. I agree that when you're constrained by your development team and the features that they can build and the dashboards that they can build, you better be darn good at the one or two things that you're selling. In AI, it's not humans that are doing that analysis anymore. And so what we have to be really good at is our data set, and making sure that the agent has very well organized access to that data set. But we no longer need to do just one thing. However, that can be a challenge in selling still. And so I do think there are maybe 4 things that the agent is particularly good at that we tend to focus our sales cycles on, and that's connecting really well with these e-commerce brands. Now, what we find though is once they get in there and realize the power of it, that's when the expansion happens. And so we still call it a super agent, we still believe it to be a super agent, but we've toned that down a little bit in the sales cycle just to help focus the conversation into what we know that the real problems are for e-commerce teams today.
I think you've touched upon this, and for those who are not familiar with ShopVision, it is a very sophisticated product under the hood. And as the technology and product leader within ShopVision, how do you design a product that's as sophisticated as it is, AI, large scale data, complex models, but still usable and actionable for brand teams and e-commerce companies who aren't data scientists or even AI experts for that matter?
Yeah, I think our job is to obfuscate away the complexity and make things like ultimately digestible. I have to credit one of my co-founders, Peter, with this. He's our chief product officer, and is insanely detail oriented at this, and also pushes our team, like pushes me. He'll come up with this product feature, and I'm like, "That's just not possible, Peter." And he's like, "Yes, it is." And I, look back once we built the thing, and like, if it was just up to me, I probably wouldn't have built that. So huge credit goes out to Peter. That being said, I think we actually had these conversations early on with like, what is our product? Is it just a chatbot? Like, is that it? Are there dashboards? Is that like yesterday's SaaS? Do we need to build dashboards? And I think what we decided was we needed to meet people where they were at. And I don't think the average e-commerce team member today is ready to fully depart from SaaS. And there's an expectation of, hey, some of this stuff needs to be like available out of the box and done for me. And so we decided to meet them where they were at. Now, we know that all you really need to interact with on our app is the agent, right? You don't actually need to use any of the pre-built dashboards. All they really are is pre-baked prompts for you, that we put a little bit of lipstick on and make it easy to digest. But at the end of the day, the core technology set is really our agent and the data. Again, at the end of the day, like you got to meet the customers where they're at. I think we will evolve as business societies, so that folks are less expectant of those things. But for today, we've got our agent, and then we have kind of the standard business user interface.
You mentioned this, and I think, I think it's important to highlight just the scale of it, but you and the team built a proprietary data set covering hundreds of thousands of sites and first party brand data That is a massive undertaking, and one I'm sure most companies would not have taken lightly. How did you, Peter, and Harry decide, okay, this is something that we really need to do for the product and for the company?
Yeah, so this was our first mission. We knew that AI is only as good as the data that supports it. We very intentionally did not want to build a ChatGPT wrapper and just rely on the foundation models training set for the main reason being, these foundation models are incredible. This is not me putting them down at all. We use all of them, but they are generic and they are wide. And we had a very specific use case in mind that we, first of all, needed to compete with them and also really wanted to make it super powerful for our customers. And so we knew that we were going to have our own data. That was like phase one of the company. The first 6 months that the company existed, all we did was figure out that problem. Then an additional 6 months happened where we were just collecting data. So, yeah, as you mentioned, we have data on hundreds of thousands of e-commerce sites. We set our eyes on North America to start, so US and Canada, and we had the top 100,000 by revenue of e-commerce sites in North America that we were visiting on a daily basis. We also we expanded to just by happenstance. We had a customer sign up in Australia, so we expanded to Australia, and now we're in Europe and Asia as well. And we had a couple like core tenants when we started this process. One, we wanted to be good citizens. We were not going to. There was all this stuff coming out, and still comes out of OpenAI's like scraping and copyright and all of this stuff. We really wanted to like leave no trace. And that wasn't only for our own security, but also like, I've been an engineer at these places, and I know it sucks to have half of your traffic eaten up by bots, right? So we are a very light touch when we arrive at a site. We're there for like 1 or 2 screens max, and we only go to a site once a day. So that was one of our core tenets. The other was our name is ShopVision for a reason. We wanted to focus on the visual. We wanted to browse these sites as if a human would. Traditional AI scrapers, they pull data. And the problem with just pulling text data and HTML data is that is not always fully representative of what's on the screen at any given time. Marketers at e-commerce companies, they only care about the visual. They only care about what their customer is going to see. As a result, marketers love to embed text in JPEGs. They love to have tiny banners that only a human could see, but when you're scraping it for text, you can't tell the difference in weight between that banner and the banner below it. Those types of things. They also care about like, what type of photography are my competitors using? Are they using lifestyle photos versus like in studio shots? What if they change that? Those types of insights our customers care a lot about. So we knew that we wanted to do this from a visual perspective, and that we wanted to avoid things like sitemaps, because sitemaps are rarely updated and they're just not super reliable. There's lots of links in a sitemap that a human could never find, but a bot could, right? And that was going to skew our data set. So we focused heavily on visual scraping and being a good citizen. Once we cracked that on a small number of sites, we just started scaling up. And I would say we have faced challenges at scale, but the system's gotten fairly sophisticated to solve those challenges.
Man, as if the data itself wasn't, complex enough, adding a visual dimension to it, I mean, just adds another layer. But as we think about data, I mean, referencing kind of other AI platforms, LLMs, and so on, there's still continues to be a question around accuracy and quality, especially at scale. How do you think about that, especially at ShopVision?
Yeah. Accuracy was another huge piece. And I will tell you, when we started our very first tests of using an agent an LLM to visually analyze the screenshot of a website, we had a 60% hallucination rate. And that was unacceptable. We decided that 99% accuracy or above was required in order for us to launch. So how did we solve that? I will tell you the simple answer of how we solved it, but the reality is we hired some really smart people, PhDs in AI and ML is really the answer. But these days, it's a little bit more clear how to solve that problem. In early 2024, late 2023, it was a little bit less clear. But we basically used humans, to me and Peter, more or less, to define a gold standard data set. And so we looked at the screenshots. We noted, hey, like these are the promotions that are happening on the page. This is the type of photography we're using, et cetera, et cetera. And so we created about 1,000 ground truth accurate data sets that were created by us. And then we use an eval process to check to make sure that the LLMs are meeting that need. And so we use that and we rerun that anytime we upgrade to a new version or anything like that. So that's still our kind of ground truth data set. We also use a lot of multi-turn inference. So instead of these screenshots, like if you think about a website, and especially ones with like infinite scroll and stuff, these screenshots can be quite large. They're often like about 1024 wide, but they could be 50,000 plus pixels long. And when you feed a single image like that into an LLM and you say like, okay, tell me everything that's going on here, it's just not going to be successful. And so there's various ways that we slice those images, and we ask the LLM very finite and small questions many times rather than asking many questions a single time, which is helpful. And frankly, some of the LLMs are better at it than others. So we tested across the three big providers, Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic. And as of today, for visual inference, Gemini is king, specifically for the visual inference that we are doing, but that may not be the case forever. And every time, a new foundation model comes out,
I'm going to shift gears just a little bit because I do want to come back to the product and definitely kind of how the product has impacted some of these companies and organizations and brands. But as the CTO, how do you think about the division of responsibilities between your technical leadership and the rest of the founding team? This is particularly for those earlier stage entrepreneurs who are listening. We're just trying to think about how you balance the technical functional side plus the general leadership side when you have more than one co-founder.
Yeah, great question. Peter, Harry, and I are super close, and we've thought about and we continue to think about culture, decision making, et cetera, at this business. We are benefiting from the fact that we are not, 22-year-olds starting our first company. We have seen a lot in our experience. We have done a lot. We have made a lot of mistakes that we don't want to repeat, and we have watched mistakes happen. And we've also watched amazing things happen, and we want to emulate those things. So I would say having three co-founders is actually something I would do again. I have a super close relationship with them, and there's very little, there is disagreement, right? But there's very little kind of, negative talk or anything like that. But I actually think the disagreement's what makes us stronger. When you have just a single person that's making all the decisions, no one person knows the right answer to everything. It's just like period, end of statement. And so our disagreements actually push us further as long as they're done, with respect, et cetera. As I said, right? Like there have been times where Peter's been like, hey, build this thing. And I'm like, that is impossible. And he's like, do it anyways. And you know what? We build a thing that is better than I ever could have imagined. Like that is the strength of our team. I always have viewed, and it's a little bit different at this company, but being at, e-commerce companies, I've always viewed engineering as a support function at the end of the day. We are not who's making the money. We are the cost center, usually the most expensive team at the company. And so at the end of the day, like we are there to enable other teams to do their work and enable, folks to come onto our website and make purchases. Here we're building software, so it's a little bit different, but I think that core tenet still kind of exists in that, engineering is there to build to the vision of a product and business and customer. And so, that's just kind of the culture and the mindset that I've always had in building my teams. And I also aim to hire highly product focused engineers. So this is a bit of an outdated term at this point, but I always used to say like engineers who think outside of the Jira ticket, like folks who are not just like ticking off a list of requirements, but actually understand like, what am I building? What customer is going to use this? How are they going to use this? And then empowering those engineers to actually make product decisions. Like Peter and I give a task to an engineer. It is vague at best. And part of that's because we're moving so quickly. The other part of that is because we have really smart people on our team that are smarter than both of us combined, and we want to enable them to actually put their stamp on it, right? So there's a whole lot of ownership that happens across the organization that I also think has led to just like a really great culture.
Interesting. If I was to sum part of that up, it's ambiguity by design, which is
Yeah,
really, it's a really interesting kind of concept.
I know it is a culture like the exact opposite of what I normally strive
Right.
for.
Right.
Uh, and I would say a lot of things about how I'm running the engineering department here, how we run the company here, are the
Yeah.
polar opposite of anything we thought we would ever do before. And, we're only 2 years in, but like thus far, we're expanding those things, not, scaling back from them.
If we look at it, the group of people now that are using the product, the customers, is there a story that stands out for you about a early customer, maybe a pilot where ShopVision meaningfully changed how they operated?
Yeah, a lot actually. So, a lot of our customers are getting really great value. We hear all the time that, and this is part of the reason Ed and I are chatting. We hear all the time it's too cheap. The founder of Herschel was one of our early customers. He said to us, like, how do you measure the impact of 1,000 better decisions over the year? And that's really what our software enables. So it's not so much like how do you measure the ROAS, again, traditional SaaS metrics. It's
Right.
how do you measure the fact that every decision I'm making could be that much better by using ShopVision. And I think, that just shows like the breadth and the depth of the improvement that we're making for these companies. But for some specific examples, I'll call on Herschel again. Herschel's a Canadian company. I won't get into deep kind of revenue numbers for them, but they're a very successful kind of mid-market direct to consumer as well as wholesale brand, and they're based in Canada. And so Memorial Day this year, they did not have any sales planned. They didn't even realize it was Memorial Day. They're based in Canada. They don't, they do have a Memorial Day. It's not the same time as it is in the US. They didn't really think about it. They realized they missed a massive opportunity there when they opened up ShopVision and saw that every single one of their competitors did Memorial Day sales. And they were just left out of that mix. And so the estimate there was, and they will be doing one next year, by the way. The estimate there is like they probably missed out on about $300,000 in incremental revenue. Another one is one where we actually enabled the customer to recapture that revenue. So we have a big outdoor wear brand, of which I'm wearing a competitor right now, but Arc'teryx is one of our customers, and they saw that Patagonia went early with their Black Friday sale last year, and were notified of that via ShopVision and actually able to launch their sale earlier. And so those types of things are getting like immediate return on investment. We've got another retailer, Craft Sports, I believe is based in Seattle. They completely changed their social calendar after using our platform for 2 weeks. So they realized, wow, our competitors are all over social media. They're super promotional, and they were none of those things. So they completely changed how they show up on social media based on the insights they were getting out of them. So there's plenty of additional. I guess I'll add one more before I stop talking, but I get excited about these things because, we're actually like, this is what we set out to do. Alliance Sales and Marketing, it's a CPG agency that helps CPG companies market and sell online, as well as like get placements in grocery stores, things like that. They were doing competitive analyses for their customers that were taking on average 6 human hours per day by somebody on their team. They support hundreds of brands. They're now able to do it automatically in 30 minutes. And so the time savings there is just massive. They're a huge user of our platform. They love it. Yeah. So lots of great stuff coming from the customers.
I'm sure we could probably have a whole episode just talking about some
Yeah.
game wins. But you just mentioned already a whole number of different features and functionality they've been able to leverage almost immediately to make changes, make quick decisions, and really impact their business. From a technical standpoint, have there been any surprises in terms of which features or capabilities customer would value most, or you thought this was going to be huge and it turned out it actually was, or maybe even vice versa?
I'm trying to think if there's been any big surprises. I would say in the features that we launched, there wasn't anything that was overly surprising. What I will say is we have built features specifically for customer requests. And this is like the joy of being a startup. The feature set we launched with was very simple. We didn't even have social media when we first launched. We didn't have ads. Like we weren't capturing that data. It was purely web, email, and that was basically it. And very quickly our customers challenge us to like have like a very wide view. And the joy of being an AI native company, having engineers that move really quickly with the speed of AI, is we were able to add those features within single digit days, and those are big movers for us. Pricing intelligence is something that was on our roadmap, but we didn't realize how big of a challenge for customers as it was. And it may end up being, kind of our banner feature. And I don't think we expected that, but understanding, how their competitors price, matching products across competitors, tracking MAP violations, for first party retailers, like those types of things we knew were problems and things that were in our wheelhouse to solve, but I don't think we knew the velocity of which we would need to build those things. And so that was definitely a surprise. The other thing is like people love our agent. And the first version of it was, and they were impressed with the first version of it. But now being on V2, I look back at V1 and like am a little embarrassed / laugh a little bit, right? Like because V2 is just incredible, like I get surprised when our sales team like generates an output in the sales process where they're like, this is what the agent can do. And they like, I see some of those things and I'm like, wait, that's our agent? Like I get really impressed with the level of analysis it can do on the data we have.
Just out of curiosity, just to go on a slight tangent, any plans to name your agent? Maybe a Clippy?
Okay, so it's not so much a tangent. We thought long and hard about this.
Okay.
It had a name. So the question was, were we going to go with like Ask ShopVision? Then we considered Linda. I don't know I do know where that came from. We have an employee named Linda who's the master at prompting. And so we were like, okay, maybe it should be named Linda. And then we ultimately decided, you know what? We're just going to call it The Agent. And the reason we ultimately decided that was I feel like naming agents has gotten a bit gimmicky. And I like what OpenAI did. It's ChatGPT. It's not a human by nature. And, like at the end of the day, I use so many agents today. A lot of them have names. I don't remember the names, like when I'm using that platform, I might remember the name, but we decided no for now. I never want to rule anything out, but we decided no.
Okay. So for now, not yet, but it's potentially on the table that our super agent will have a name sometime in the future.
And I will say, like, to go on a tangent a little bit more than that, like, we also decided, do we want multiple agents? Like, should we have specialist agents? And should there be an agent specifically for marketing teams and one for merchandising teams? And again, we felt like there were a lot of companies going that way and still are going that way, where you log on and there's 50 different agents you could talk to and they all have different names and an avatar and all of this stuff. And we felt like it puts a lot of like impetus on the customer to know which agent you should ask which information. And it's actually our responsibility to take in any question and route it to the right place. So behind the scenes, we do have many agents. The customer is only interacting with a single one.
So I think that's a good kind of segue to lessons for entrepreneurs, particularly those that are trying to build within AI and AI first kind of products. So if you think about kind of the experience that you've had and you think about some of the things that other founders are potentially doing, especially trying to build AI first products for business users, what's the mindset shift that they need to make? What are some of the mistakes that you're seeing, or maybe not mistakes, but some of the things that are creating hurdles for them to build AI first products for the business user?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that like when we founded this company, we threw away the rule book. So I'll speak specifically when it comes to engineering and then kind of expand a little bit. But if you had caught me at my last role, I was like, we got to be agile development. We need to use Jira. Product management should be putting the specs in the tickets. We need a QA team. We need project management. All of those things. We have none of those things at ShopVision by design, because in our values was like in our founding document, it was like, let's test these theories. I've always done it this way. Does that mean that's the right way to do it? Probably not. And maybe it is, and we're open to that too, right? We don't have Jira at ShopVision. Sorry if you're listening at Atlassian, but I will do everything I can to not get back to that. We use a company called Linear, which is ticket tracking, just very light, very, very light. And the only reason is because the team has gotten so big now and we're moving so quickly. We need to have some level of understanding what's happening. But again, like we keep ticket writing and all of that stuff to an absolute minimum to give the maximum amount of creativity to the engineering team. The engineers are who know this space the best, and they are the most informed in this space. I don't want to tell them how to build the thing. If I tell them how to build the thing, then I could just farm it out to an agent, to be honest. Like I don't need an engineer. And so, I want to keep things super flexible. One of the challenges for businesses is the speed in which this is moving. I've been in technology for the last 20 years. We thought things were moving fast then, nothing compared to how quickly things are moving now. Tomorrow morning, a new Gemini model could come out that really changes the game. Like we don't know. And it is moving that quickly. If we had this podcast episode a week ago, I would tell you that I was using Claude Code to write code for me. It was the best, that could possibly happen. But as of Monday, I went back to Cursor. Cursor launched 2.0. Cursor 2.0 is incredible. We'll see what Claude Code does next week. It is moving that quick, and you have to be flexible enough or you will get left behind. Keeping things flexible, keeping things ambiguous, as we talked about, I think is huge. When it comes to entrepreneurs and on the business side, I think we're in a unique, maybe not unique, but we haven't been here in a while. And so what I mean by that is you look at the cloud providers, so your AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle, and others. They made a pretty strong stance a while ago that they were not going to compete with their own customers. And they are a tool provider. And so anybody could feel safe to use their tools and build with those tools a company and launch it. I don't think the AI companies are quite at that level of maturity yet. And what I have seen is companies get built and then ChatGPT launches a new feature and puts those companies out of business. And I don't think they're doing it intentionally to put those companies out of business, but I think it's pretty safe for me today that if I was to build a company based on technology that AWS offers, I don't think AWS is going to show up the next week and put me out of business. I would not feel that comfortable with OpenAI or any, I'm not just picking on them. So what I think is really important when you're founding a company today, if you're using those technologies, is to understand, am I just repackaging something that OpenAI can do? Or am I actually providing a net new data set or feature that OpenAI is likely never to go after? I actually spoke with somebody at OpenAI about it and asked him the question of like, how do they think about it internally? How do they think about being a product and also being a platform? It's very hard to be both. AWS doesn't serve people. It's just a platform, right? Of course, they have Amazon, but the businesses are quite separate. So what he said was OpenAI looks to defend against companies who have a thin layer on top of their services. So basically a ChatGPT wrapper, right? If you're building a ChatGPT wrapper in 2025 or soon to come 2026 here, like, you're wasting your time. The next version of ChatGPT is going to put you out of business. I think what you need to think about building is a thick layer on top of their services where they can't really come after you. So I think that's a really important thing when you're founding a company based on AI technologies that are out there, is like these companies can put you out of business tomorrow if you're just building a thin layer.
Yeah. You've mentioned this about, not just what you build, but how you build it. And we've talked about really just being flexible in terms of your thinking, removing some of the rigidity and potentially even that ambiguous by design or ambiguity by design. As you've been building and working with your co-founders to build ShopVision, I imagine there's going to be some trade-offs that had to have been made. How do you deal with those trade-offs? How do you make the decision on what to pursue, what to pause, and maybe what to can just axe altogether, especially from a product and technology standpoint?
Yeah. It's really all comes down to like what the customer needs. At the end of the day, like we could build ourselves this very cool thing that we think is really cool. And if nobody uses it, it's a waste of everybody's time. And so we are super close with our customers. We've also found that in this kind of AI age, I think everyone knows, every e-commerce company knows, like, hey, we need to be using AI to be more efficient, but they don't really know how to do that. And so when they enter into a relationship with us, they have people who join us that think about AI all day long. And they kind of lean on us for like consultancy in that, not in an official way, but just like asking us like, what do you think's happening with, Shopify and OpenAI's partnership and those type of things. And so we get really close with our customers. We hope to be able to do that, at scale. It's like part of, what our customer success team does as well. And so it's really customer impact that we look for. That's how we prioritize things. We're also a startup. Money matters. Can't just spin our, we got to keep the lights on. And so we go after where we think, there's going to be maximum benefit for customers and therefore ourselves.
As a technical co-founder, what have you thought about in terms of building the go-to-market side of the business? What's been your approach to sales and marketing? And for those, just to give context, Jeff he wears multiple hats, which includes the go-to-market side of things. But I'd like to kind of get your take on balancing it and kind of what your perspective is on the go-to-market.
Yeah, one of the tenets of our business is we should always look to see if we can automate something with AI before we hire or before we do anything. And I think there are a lot of things in GTM that you can do with AI these days, and so we make sure that folks have the tools to that. I don't think anything is quite autopilot yet, and it's probably another podcast episode to discuss if we'll ever get there. But I think we'll get closer and closer to that ideal. And so we hire with. We make sure that the people that we hire are very comfortable using AI tools, and we reserve pieces of our devs to support other functions in the business who need things automated. So that's the big one there, is like making sure that our go-to-market leader has access to developers to build their workflows and their automations, et cetera. Listen, we're an all hands on deck kind of company. We work really hard. We also rest really hard, which is great. Yeah, I do sales. I never thought I was going to be. I think I was, at least in the first couple months of selling this platform, I think I had the most sales. So shout out to me for that. We now have a director of sales who's incredible from Shopify, and she's awesome. So I've been able to scale out a little bit, but which is probably for the best, because anytime a customer or prospective customer asks me, do you guys offer this? I just say yes. I'm like, I know the engineering team can build it, but so it's probably better for everyone that I'm not in as many sales calls. But I totally support with go-to-market. I built our trade show booth at Shop Talk Chicago myself with a vest on and the whole deal. So listen, when you're an early stage company, founders, you gotta wear a lot of hats. And I definitely support go-to-market. I'm in all of our go-to-market meetings. And really what I'm trying to bring to it today is my experience in understanding how e-commerce companies market, because those are the people we are marketing to, and we should meet them where they're at. And two, making sure that we have dev time to support our go-to-market leaders.
As you've transitioned into this co-founder role, I mean, you've held leadership roles and definitely leadership technical roles, but as now transitioning into a co-founder role, what are some of the lessons and challenges that you've learned kind of as you've made the transition? What skills have you developed that you didn't think that you needed in previous roles that you found extremely helpful in this role that you're in today?
Yeah, great question. Those who know me would say I like to have control or my hands in a lot of different areas of the business. And I've definitely had my hand slapped a couple times in that process when I wasn't in a founder seat. And I think my last role, I really focused on like, okay, I'm only thinking about technology. That is that's what I know. And I really stayed in the engineering department. And so complete shift when you're a co-founder. You have to understand every aspect of the business. And again, I'm talking to customers, I'm selling, I'm managing the engineering team. Like all of those things are happening just out of necessity when you're an early stage company. And so flipping that kind of script back for me was something I didn't expect to need to be doing. I also, not being in I thought I could understand this before being in a co-founder seat. I clearly couldn't. Of just the amount of time I spend thinking about the business is, I work really hard previously. I work really hard when I work, and then I like to take time off, and I like to be with my family and all of that stuff. When you're a co-founder, that time blends. And this isn't shocking to me that it happens to people. It is shocking to me that it happened to me. And I think everyone around me is also shocked. I think about the business 24/7. I really do. I don't expect that of the folks that work for me. We all work really hard, but I think everybody deserves, I believe very, very strongly in work-life balance. And I think the startups that are asking their engineers to work 6 days a week, like it's just diminishing returns. Folks aren't meant to be doing that. But yeah, that's been a shock to me, is that I think about the business 24/7, and my willingness to let go of some of those sacred cows, or whatever that saying is, like the Jira. I can't believe I'm not using Jira, and yet it's so freeing. And so things like that, like I really challenged myself to question everything that I had done in the past and decide if it was the right fit. Great, I'm going to bring it over. If it wasn't, then it's not. And to be really agile there. So those are the things I think I've probably flexed the most.
Something tells me that Atlassian's going to be quickly contacting you after this.
I know, right? We do use Trello, not on the engineering team, but on our design uses Trello. So that's an Atlassian product now. So they have completely lost us.
When you started to talk a little bit about the future and some of the things that you and your co-founders and your team are thinking about, when we start to look ahead and you're in the thick of things, what are some of the technology market shifts do you believe will impact e-commerce and e-commerce intelligence in particular?
So obviously agentic shopping is the elephant in the room right now. OpenAI has announced partnerships with Shopify, Walmart, Etsy, and others I'm sure are coming. I take a bit more of a measured approach on this when it comes to kind of my opinion on this. It may be because I'm a skeptic at heart, but I think humans love to browse. I really do. I think there is a use case where I want to talk to an agent and it's going to buy something for me. And I think that use case totally exists. When I want to do research on something and I'm like, what's the best camera to buy? What are the features? Let's get into it. Let's have that discussion. I can see that for agentic shopping. When I'm looking at clothes, I want to see a lot of clothes next to each other. And a chat interface is just not it for me. And I think especially in fashion and apparel, like you're going to see a percentage of those sales come through agents. But I don't think it's going to be 100% of sales. I really don't. But I do think that it is going to be a new way that people shop. I think with a lot of this stuff, right? Like, new technology is scary and amazing. And people are like, oh, this AI, it's going to take over everything. Nobody's going to have jobs. But then like the reality comes out and you're like, okay, it's just, when Microsoft Excel first came out, people were like, oh my God, what's going to happen to accountants? So you're like, you're not going to need, those type of, whatever. Like, it just becomes a tool we use to like be more efficient and get even better at our jobs. So I think agentic shopping is going to be a piece of the future. I don't think it's going to take over shopping 100%, but it's definitely something we're keeping an eye on. And it's something that the brands that we talk to are asking us about. I think the other big thing that I'm still unsure on is what happens to search. In my life, Google's dead. I'm sorry, Google. But I don't Google things anymore. I just don't Google things anymore. I ask ChatGPT. I'm like a very basic iPhone user. And I have never had a widget on my lock screen. I have ChatGPT on my lock screen because it's my Google. And if you look at my ChatGPT history, it's probably ridiculous and it's saving all of my memory and blah, blah, blah. So God knows what it thinks about me, but I just don't Google things anymore. And so I'm interested to see how search engine optimization is going to transfer into LLM optimization or GEO or whatever acronym people are calling it right now. And I think there's companies starting to arise that are like, oh, we have this solved. We can help you show up in LLMs. I don't think that's true. It took a long time for people to figure out how to rank up. Now it's like common knowledge how you rank in Google, right? Like it's so common knowledge that it's like not even an industry anymore. But I think it's still fairly unsure how it works with like training data sets and all of that stuff. There's some best practices. Of course, you should allow OpenAI's crawlers onto your website. Of course, you should have, LLM ready data on your website, those types of things. But I don't think people are actually fully able to understand how to optimize their businesses for that. And we are already seeing a lot of traffic being shifted from Google into ChatGPT. So SimilarWeb did a report on this recently where they just talked about the referral traffic coming from the LLMs, and it's taking up a significant amount. So I think that's going to be a huge thing to watch and figure out for brands and retailers is how do we supplement the traffic that was coming from Google and Google ads and all of that stuff, and make sure that we're not just losing that traffic now, that it's being replaced by LLM traffic.
When we are thinking about the future and we think about what you believe and you and your co-founders believe will be ShopVision in 3 to 5 years and what that success looks like, how do you and the team kind of cut through right now a lot of hype as well versus what's actually going to transform e-commerce brands and how they operate?
Yeah, it's hilarious. So we talk about this a lot. The when we founded this company, we were like AI, AI, AI. All we wanted to talk about was AI. We're an AI native company. All over our website, it was like AI agents and this and that. We've taken a step back on that, actually. We are still AI to the core. We are an AI native company. It will always be our DNA. I kind of view it as, when cloud first came out and everyone was moving, from on-prem to cloud, it was a huge deal when people said they were cloud native, right? If somebody came to you today and said we're cloud native, you'd be like, okay, so is everyone else. Like, did you used to be on-prem? Like, what, like, are you from the next? Like, what's going on? I kind of think AI is getting there faster. Every company is an AI company right now. We go to these trade shows, we go to Shop Talk and e-tail and all of these. Every single company, even if they've been around for 20 years, they're all of a sudden an AI native company. And so I think this kind of AI washing has happened at rapid pace. And part of it's the nature of AI. You can build so quickly. You can become an AI native company so quickly. You can AI wash so quickly. So we've taken a bit of a step back from that in our marketing language. The other thing we realize is like, at the end of the day, people buy software because of the impact that it makes on their business, not because of the technology that it was founded on. So we don't talk about AI nearly as much as we used to. I think that's part of reducing the hype. Let's focus on the measured impact that we can make on your business. I think where we see ourselves in 5 years as this technology improves at rapid pace is kind of the central intelligence system for an e-commerce company. So we already connect all of your third-party data, everything that's going on in your market with your competitors, with your first-party data. So customers will link up their e-commerce platform with our agent, and it can already analyze like the questions I used to hear at e-commerce companies, like, why were our sales down last week? And you've got one, the marketing person is like, well, CACs were up last week, everybody's sales were down last week, but the business person doesn't really believe you. And you're like, that kind of argument, we solved it. Ask our agent why your sales were down last week. It'll tell you. It'll tell you if your competitors were too. It'll tell you if, hey, actually somebody launched a sale and their sales were way up, so yours were down, those types of things. And so I think we get more and more embedded in all of the business processes at these e-commerce companies, and we really become that central intelligence system. I think we will not go after being your email platform, for example. There's amazing email platforms out there already. Klaviyo does a great job. Braze does a great job. Iterable, all of those. But we may become a data source for those, right? Those have, all of those companies are building their own agents. And like, I think 2 years ago, we thought maybe we would be the only agent you would need. I don't think we think that anymore. It's more now, how can you leverage our data inside of your other platforms that are your best in class platforms, make those platforms better?
I only have a couple more questions. I know and I have actually tons more, but 2 more questions. First, when you think, and it's kind of wild that ShopVision is still as young and still at its early stages as it is. But when you kind of think back at ShopVision today versus ShopVision just even a year ago, is there already anything that you would have done a little bit differently? And, and what are some of those things?
That's a good question. Scraped more data faster. That's the biggest one. Like, you can't go back in time. And so I would have focused on that. Like I said, earlier in the podcast, that pricing intelligence, had no idea that it was just going to be such a big thing. And so would have started that earlier. Other than that, not a lot of regret yet. Talk to me in a couple of years, but and I'll be telling you, we have Jira now, and I wish we had it from the beginning. No, but yeah, not a ton of changes at this point. I think I will say that like some things we thought may have been big are not as big as we thought they would be. For example, like us generating generating emails on behalf of these customers and all of that. Like we thought we would be the kind of single agent for everyone. And I don't think that's the case anymore. And also we don't really want to compete in that space. It's not our DNA. So that, we didn't spend a ton of time on that though. So it's not like a regret, but we definitely thought we were headed in that direction. And I don't think we are.
This is a question we ask all of our guests is there something small but powerful that our listeners can try this week? A practice, a tip, a shift that they can immediately do that can help move the needle for themselves as an entrepreneur, as a founder?
Yeah. Question everything. If you have a habit or a thing or a way of working, way of showing up, those types of things, like just question it. Maybe you keep it around, maybe you don't. But I think everything's worth a question. I very much I got on repeat mode. I was very much robotic. Like this is how so like in my career, I have started engineering teams from scratch many times. And so I had a formula in my head when I came over to ShopVision, and I was like, okay, this is the formula. I've done this 20 times before. I'm going to do it again. Right. But I challenged myself, and the outcome for me has been far and above what I could have achieved had I just, plug and play the traditional formula. The other thing is start coding. You don't, there's so many, like vibe code, just vibe code. I really think, I don't know that everyone can be an engineer today, but I do think that any engineer can be a full stack engineer, write in any language and in any framework. I think folks that are like, for engineers that are listening, that are hesitant or resistant or thinking, I leave to like a lot of security leaks and a lot of this and a lot of that, like you're just going to be left behind. Unfortunately, like all your competition is using AI, and people competing for jobs, like all of that stuff. Just start getting comfortable with it because it's here to stay. It's if you're still putting servers in your office, you're gonna, except for some very specific use cases, but you're gonna get left behind. So yeah, those are the things I'd recommend.
Those are great pieces of advice. The coding is, in spite of what people say, it's still here. It's just a different format. It's just a different way, and there's just becomes just a evolution of the skill. But there's still so much value in learning how to do it and really its application. So I think that's fantastic advice. Jeff, thank you so much for spending the time today, sharing your experience, your journey, and some lessons learned along the way. And I know that this is just the start of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, we'll have to do a part 2 in a couple years, and I'll tell you what I really regret then.
That's fantastic. So thanks all for listening to Margin for Error. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe to the podcast, share it with other builders and backers in your network. Until next time.